There we go. That was Jan van der Roost's Arsenal. And I believe we had some technical hitches at the very start. So I'm hoping now at this stage everybody can actually hear my voice. I'm sure the visual was keeping everybody intrigued. So I will start the show again. You're very welcome to DCBtv. This is essentially the virtual band room and virtual performance space for the Dublin Concert Band for the next few weeks, every Thursday at 7:30. And we decided to go online because so many of bands across and organizations across the world are really suffering from the inability to perform with each other, to rehearse and share their love and passion of music with each other. So we decided to take some of that music online and enjoy it with all of you at home. I hope now at this stage you can all hear me, and I'm seeing some likes and telling me that the audio is coming in well now, so that's good. Thank you very much for joining us live on DCB TV. In the description that you couldn't hear at the start, I basically told everybody that couldn't hear it that we were going to go through the next few weeks with a few sections in every episode. And that was the first. So that was the audio and visual track from a performance earlier this year, and indeed the last performance, the actual last public performance of the band in Windmill Lane on the 15th of February. And that march was one of the first pieces that we performed in a collaborative concert with the Boher Boy Band all the way from Limerick, and of course their wonderful conductor, Mr. Andrew Jordan. Little did we know at that time that was going to be one of the last public performances that the band could commit in 2020. So as a result, we've decided to take everything online and share some of those virtual premieres with you, as well as a few other items. In just a moment, we're going to meet a couple of the members of the band and talk to them and see how life in lockdown is going and what they do for their day-to-day. As well as that, we're going to go to Conductor's Corner, which is where I'm going to share with you maybe some helpful insights in terms of how I program music for the Dublin Concert Band, and in general terms, how I like to approach music. As well as that, we're going to meet the Friends of DCB. These are various different people and organizations that we may have collaborated with before in the past. It may be solo singers, or indeed some people that used to be in the band and are no longer with us and have left to foreign shores. And as well as that, we might reach out and connect with some other bands that maybe want to share some of their virtual performances with us as well. And a good opportunity to connect online, with a view to maybe sometime in the future, when we can, connecting and performing in the live scenario. So, on with the rest of the episode, and now we're going to meet some of the members of the band, and I'm delighted to welcome two members of the band. And if we do have any technical issues, please feel free to send us a message or ping us a little message to let us know. And we're going to go to Toby now. Toby, you maybe give us a little bit of background on yourself and how you came to be in the Dublin Concert Band.
I played in concert bands since my teenage years, essentially, and of course I wanted to continue playing music in Ireland as well. So I searched for bands that I thought would be good, and ended up with Dublin Concert Band. I actually contacted them already in Germany, and basically after arriving in Ireland, it took me maybe just a month or so until I ended up with DCB. So, although I should say I'm actually based in Naas, so I live in Naas, and because I also work in Naas, so that's very handy. So I normally commute into Dublin for the rehearsals and for the gigs, essentially. So yeah, and work-wise, I work for the food industry, so thank God we're essential. But I have an office job, so I'm not in the lab. So I've also been confined to work from home for the last couple of weeks, just like so many others.
And how do you find working from home? Is it achievable with everything that you have to do, or do you find any difficulty in that?
I'm not a big fan of it in general, to be honest, because I just enjoy having a proper office environment, which I don't have here. I live with 4 other people in the house, well, with 5 actually, but one is away because he went home literally, and also working from home. So I don't have a separate room to work from, and I'm not a big fan. And it's also a psychological thing in a way, to leave your house and go to work and be there and then come back. It works. I mean, it has to make do. I have the equipment, the technical equipment, and I'm able to do all my work from home. So yeah, it works kind of. Let's see how long it lasts. But I prefer to be back in the office, to be honest.
Yeah, you've got an interesting scenario in front of you, because if I'm right in saying, because of the phases of lockdown, you won't actually be able to get back into Dublin for quite a while, and that might affect, potentially if the band is back operating and things because of where you are geographically. Isn't that right?
Yeah, true. I mean, so I think it's the 20th of July when we will be allowed to travel freely within Ireland, and that will be the date for me to go back to Dublin. For whatever reason, to see friends. For one, I don't think rehearsals will commence on the 20th of July, but yeah, because the 20-kilometer, which is the next step, the 20-kilometer radius is not sufficient for me, unfortunately. So I will have to wait until July to be back in Dublin.
Yeah, absolutely. Maureen, I'm going to go back to you. Unfortunately, I think some people are reporting that your audio was kind of kicking in and out. Would you mind just giving us again just who you are and what you're doing and how life is in lockdown? Sorry to ask you to repeat it.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so I'm Maureen. I'm a flute and piccolo player. I work with Irish National Opera, so I'm working from home at the moment. And I'm also a psychology student, so I have been studying, but we're on summer break now. And I'm still getting flute and piccolo lessons, so I'm still practicing.
Good for you. Can I pry and ask, how is INO, Irish National Opera, dealing with working remotely and virtually?
Yeah, so we're all at home, and obviously no rehearsals and no live performances. But thankfully, we had the technology to create great recordings of our previous productions. So they're all on our website now, and we're working away in the background, and hopefully we'll, be getting some good online projects up soon. But yeah, it's weird. Obviously, we're used to we could have up to 100 people in a rehearsal room at one time. So it's quite odd, and it's obviously we as well, the artists that we usually work with are finding new ways to work, and I think it's obviously a very steep learning curve for everyone. We suddenly ended up in this situation, so we didn't really know how to deal with it, but we're getting there.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Good for you. Toby, can I ask, just as a percussionist, obviously, in the band and as a practicing musician, how are you dealing with lockdown, specifically as a musician in isolation? I'm sure, playing the drum kit in the local estate isn't necessarily viable. So is there any maybe tips and hints that you could share with anybody that is keeping you going? Are you ramping up the amount of listening you're doing? Or have you got the practice pad out? Give us some insight in terms of what you're doing.
Well, yes, obviously, setting up a kit and playing a kit is not an option. It's never been an option, really, to be honest, since I moved out of my parents' place, because neighbor-wise, setting up a kit is probably the worst you can have. But I do have a practice pad. Something that also works astonishingly well, to be honest, that might sound funny, is air drumming. When you're just trying to figure out a rhythm or something, playing it, like imagining having a kit in front of you, but just doing air drumming, that actually works astonishingly well, I have to say. Other than that, I listen to a lot of music. Also, concerts that I've played in previous years. I also have a digital piano, which I actually purchased during the lockdown. I'm a self-taught piano player. I'm not great, but I'm self-taught, with chords and stuff. Accompanying songs that I hear works astonishingly well. So that is something that I've been doing as well here. I used to have one in Germany, but I sold it, and I now have one again. So access to keys again here in Ireland, which is great. That's basically it. Yeah, but of course, nothing beats the real thing. So I'm looking forward to get back behind the kit. Sure.
Absolutely. We have a question in from Hannah Levy here. I'm gonna send it towards you if that's okay, Maureen. And regarding Arsenal, so the first virtual performance that we shared with people at home today, and regarding how we approached it in rehearsal, is there anything in particular that you feel we did well or didn't do so well on the performance night? There's a very direct question from Hannah there.
Yeah, so well, I think that march in particular has an awful lot of detail in articulation. So we focused on an awful lot of that in rehearsal. And then, of course, when you get to a performance venue, everything sounds different. But I think we did quite well with the articulation in that piece. It was a bit of a boomy venue, so it was a little bit difficult. Yeah, I think because we had focused on it in rehearsals so much, we were very aware. And of course it opened the concert, didn't it? So, we really had to focus on it in the end. So.
Absolutely. Toby, just on that point, actually, and it's a very good point. How do you refocus in it when you go into a new environment? So, for example, going from the DCB band room into the Windmill Lane venue that we performed Arsenal and the other repertoire, how do you reset your ears, so to speak, to adapt to that in a boomy environment?
Well, I think it's very good and important to have a sound check, of course. That's where I can adjust, and that's where you can basically listen and can hear how it reacts. Other than that, sometimes, yes, it's an issue depending on the venue that you're not able to hear everybody properly because either they're too far away or it's too boomy or whatever. But in that case, Brendan, you're the man as a conductor. I am just like everybody else. I have to follow you, and that should basically do the trick.
No pressure is what you're saying. No pressure.
Yeah, but that's. I mean, seriously, like if you can't hear certain parts or like losing out on the full sound, that's where the conductor comes in.
Yeah, it's really difficult. And as a percussionist myself, I have been there and have experienced it where you almost feel like you're in no man's land, so to speak, and you're not existing with the band in a musical sense. Just as a little point of reference as well, if we remember rightly, I think you were the person that actually recommended the piece of music to the band, because we have a really good process in DCB where we have a musical repertoire group and also for the wider group to recommend. And I think, Toby, it was you that recommended Arsenal. So if I'm right in saying that, would you maybe tell us why specifically you wanted the band to perform that march?
Yeah, that's right. I recommended it and I'm actually delighted it got selected and was performed. Well, it's a piece I've played before, a couple of years ago, actually twice, because I played the snare drum part and the timpani part, and I liked it. It's like a lot of people are ambivalent towards marches, but I always say there are some really beautiful ones out there, concert marches in particular, and that one is a march that I instantly liked. I find it very catchy. It has a certain grandeur. Actually, it reminds me a lot of Elgar, Pomp and Circumstance, these types of marches. I just kind of liked it, and I thought, okay, I give it a go. I would love to perform this again with DCB, so I suggested it, and here we go.
Brilliant. And just to transition into that, Warren, if you were to choose a piece of music right now, the first piece of music that you're going to play when we come out of lockdown and the band are back in the in-person environment again, what's that first piece of music that you would like to hear when we get out of lockdown?
Oh, that is so difficult. I don't know if I could choose one, but I'd love it to be a march. I really like marches. So any march. Arsenal would be a good one.
Absolutely. Toby, same question. What's your first piece of music on the bandstand, so to speak, when we get out of lockdown?
Well, there are two answers, I think. The first is obviously I'd say Sing, 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 because that is my piece. But the other answer is, well, yeah, to be honest, I don't have a particular preference. I think I'd just be happy to be playing again.
Yeah.
No, it could be anything. Like, it should be a piece where I have something, like not a piece where I have like 84 bars of rest or something. But other than that, I think I'm pretty flexible.
Good. Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to leave both of you to it now, and thanks a million for joining us online and talking to us. And I would like to maybe invite you back some other time as well, maybe just to share an update in terms of how you're getting on. But to both of you, from all of us and from myself, thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully, very soon. So thanks to Maureen and thanks to Toby.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So there we are. That was Maureen and Toby, and thank you to both of them for joining us on DCBtv. I hope everybody can still hear me if we haven't hit any more technical glitches at this point. So you might give me a thumbs up on the thread just to let me know that everything is going well and safe at this stage. Thanks to both of them for giving us some insight in terms of how they're living life just at the minute in terms of lockdown. The next section that we're going to share with you is actually, funny enough, some of the things that we touched on in the interview we just passed, and we're going to Conductor's Corner. And actually some of the things have been mentioned in terms of approaching repertoire already and why marches are so useful. And one of the key elements for me in terms of marches is the vast amount of skill set that's required as a musician. So I always try and ask bands and orchestras that perform any march to think about it in general terms, that it's not necessarily about the specifics of that repertoire, but how we're going to apply the skill set to other pieces of music. So I'm going to pull up the video again. And that, of course, is the opening of the march. The opening of the march and the introduction is so key to any march at all. In terms of the structure of marches, we think about the typical framework that is there. We have an introduction, we might have a first strain and a second strain. Typically we go into a trio and we go into a break strain, and then a recapitulation or a coda of some sort. But the introduction more often than not sets out the stall. It's really kind of a statement of intent for the rest of the music. And for clarity of the musicians in terms of their thinking of approach, it's important that they think about that in a big structure so that they're not necessarily just focused on how that specific note or the articulation on that specific note, but how that note might be found elsewhere in the score and how it should be interpreted at that moment. The introduction of this piece of music is very clever in terms of its writing because the first 6 bars are very articulate. There's a real sense of dynamicism about them, and in the process of rehearsing I asked the band to make sure there was clarity in all the notes. So the beauty of march style is that when you see a note, and it might be a crotchet or quaver, we don't necessarily play it to the same length that we might find that note in a different piece of music. For example, in a chorale, we will play longer and broader and more legato style through a chorale and a hymn, whereas in a march we're going to detach the notes and make sure that there's clarity on the notes. However, in this introduction, the composer Jan van der Rust plays 6 bars of something which has that clarity and detail, but then he transitions into the style of the first strain. So he allows this harmonic pulsing that goes on through before we have this pickup into the first strain. And as you might think, the importance there at this point is in terms of balance. Because it's going into the first strain, typically in marches the first strain might be reflective, or it might have something which is articulate. In this case it is more legato in style and more sonorous. So we want to make sure that the balance is correct, and you can hear a lot of that harmonic pulsing going along in the background of the band. For me, the likes of percussion is certainly a kind of a secondary notion at this point. It's additional, it's almost the icing on the cake. The people that will define the tempo in this case are the likes of the trombones and the tuba with that harmonic pulsing. For the likes of the clarinets, who have the leading motif over the top, we're thinking about not rushing. They have more detail and lots of character in terms of the style and the quality of the line that they have. So, for example, with semiquavers that have a diatata, we'll make sure that they're exaggerating that to the nth degree, but trying to play as broadly through those phrases. If I let it play on, you'll hear that there's lots of clarity coming through in the clarinets. And just at that moment, before we have a repeat of the first strain, you can hear that texturally we've added a great number of instruments, including the flutes and the trumpet. For these people, they need to think about who's already playing and the fact that I have not been, and addressing the dynamic quality appropriately. So, for example, having not played for, say, 12 bars and the dynamic might be mezzo 40, if it's quite sparsely scored, they need to be thinking much less than mezzo 40 because they will overpower the rest of the band. At this point then we're joined by a kind of a baritone tenor section joining in with the repeat of the first two. And on it goes from there, and I'm going to skip on just ever so slightly to the next section. So we've just transitioned out of a piece of music which essentially for the audience and for the listener takes us away from that first strain which has been repeated twice quite cleverly to make sure that it keeps the music interesting for us. And all of the detail in the character changes. So we probably go into a reflective minor key, and you can hear there's almost something medieval about the nature and the style of the music. And again, the scoring has been vastly reduced. But then we transition into something much broader and full of grandeur. I will skip on ever so slightly again. And there, once again, we have the repeat of the introduction. So the introduction has been at the start, has been at a junction point before we go into the trio, and almost completely recapitulated as it was found in the first iteration, it's found in the same way. And you can probably hear all of the same threads out of the introduction that have been pulled and put into that first strain as well. For musicians, they need to be thinking about the kind of relative nature of what they hear and play at the start, and how they transition out of that into the other sections. So then we go into what is essentially the back strain or the break strain, and this takes us somewhere further away than we've been before. Very sonorous, very legato, and should be much quieter in terms of balance. And almost always, for myself as a conductor, here's the section that will show up some difficulties in terms of attaining the quality of tuning and intonation, because we've probably up to this point had a couple of what I'm calling large-scale interruptions, where the band have to put a lot of power into their instrument, a lot of pressure perhaps on their face, but now we're going into something very, very reflective and sonorous and subtle. And the delicate balance of getting that immediately, having played potentially quite loudly for a while, is something that we need to consider in our playing. Again, it's all about thinking about the overall and big structure and how the impact is being felt by the audience or listener. And I will just skip on ever so slightly. And so this is coming towards the end of that first section. And again, we have the return of this somewhat medieval figure where you could feel yourself perhaps in a courtyard with a king and a queen and jesters. And you could almost have a sense that that music would translate onto a recorder ensemble, for example. And if we think about it in those terms, how do we translate that in terms of performance? Maybe the quality and the attack doesn't necessarily have to be as aggressive. It's about the articulation, and more specifically about the length of the note, how we address the start of the note and where we lift off at the very end, giving as much air around the notes as possible. And we continue on again with this sense of grandeur, and now everybody in the band is playing. For me at this point, the key consideration for all of the instrumentalists is to think that even though we have all now joined to the score and we're all potentially playing quite loudly, this is not the finish. It's not the climax. This is not the moment where we have to give away the entire game, so to speak. So we need to make sure that we're still within the balance of each other, but not playing so loudly that we can't really reach for that pinnacle moment that will really set audiences back in the back of their chairs and enjoying something as a spectacle. So moving on once again. And guess what we have right at the very end? Exactly what we started with. Almost the exact same rhythm and harmonic nature in terms of its makeup, the introduction once again. So it is found all the way through the piece of music as a thread. So important. I hope that has been of some use as an insight in terms of the approach and what I would think about as a conductor when we approach march music. For me, it's one of the most important tool sets as a piece of literature in the music setting, to allow musicians to indulge in things which are legato, staccato, thinking about the starts of note, the end of note, and how we balance and listen. And for me, going into an environment like this, especially with a march, one of the most paramount elements for any musician is the ability to perform and listen at the same time, because we can adapt and listen to each other and almost intuitively find out how we should be playing by listening to others. So, so important. So we're back now, and we're going to transition hopefully to a friend of DCB who I hope is waiting in a back room somewhere here in the production area. And the first thing that I want to share with you is actually a really big moment for the band in recent times, where because of lockdown and we were considering what to do and what's the next step, we decided we would put together a virtual performance, which so many bands and orchestras have, and to such a great high quality. I have to say I've really enjoyed seeing the content of other groups online. But what we wanted to do was consider the ability to connect in with people and enjoy a considered collaboration online, if it was possible. And one of the main things for me as a member of staff of the Royal Irish Academy of Music is inclusivity and diversity. And it was noted at the time that we were looking as a project for online that perhaps people who are subject to physical or intellectual disabilities or visual impairments are maybe suffering a little bit more in a different position just at the minute. And obviously, for content, not all the content that we find is online. So we decided we would reach out, and we found a brilliant collaboration with the Holy Family School for the Deaf Choir. And what I'd like to share with you now is just a little bit of the RTE News clip, which, all being well, is here.
Only sky. Imagine all the people living for today.
Never did we think that this curfew would enable the world to renew. The sky, the sea are so bright blue, inspired by the new worldview. Zoom, baby, driving us so crazy. Zoom, baby, so easy.
I'm Shirley Higgins. I'm a teacher in Holy Family School for the Deaf. I teach home economics is my main subject, but I also teach sign language as well. I'm there over 22 years. And how I started choir was I was seconded to Centre for Deaf Studies for 2 years to be a sign language teacher. So there's only 2 of us in the country of hearing sign language teachers qualified. So when I came back to school, I was asked to translate a song for Mass because it's a big part of our school. So I started with 11 girls, 1 song, and then I get involved, which is a Dublin-based project where religious music is sent out to schools, and so there's over 2,500 children in that. They learn 21 songs, and then they perform for a night in the Helix. So we were meant to perform for 1 night, and they came and seen us, and we were asked to perform for the 3 nights. So we have kids from age 3 up to adults that do it. So there'll be about 150 altogether. But the kids in our school love music. If if they're the way, they would never be in class, they'd be doing choir the whole time, like any kids.
That's amazing. Can I ask how lockdown and the phases that we're in at the minute, how has that affected you? And have, I suppose, what are the negatives, and then maybe if there are any positives, would you maybe share with us?
Give me my class any day. It's much easier. I suppose it's very different for us in that, where if you're a mainstream school teacher, you could give work and you could send it out, and then you're assuming that the children can understand it. For us in our situation, because our children are deaf, a lot of them, their first language is Irish Sign Language. So what we've been doing to make work accessible is we've been translating books. They're meant to be reading, poetry, exercise classes, woodwork lessons, home economics lessons, translating them into ISL, video in it, and we set up a school YouTube account. So the kids then have access to their lessons in that way. Our SNAs have been great in that they have, for if there's new teachers, say, that started this year that wouldn't have sign language, they link in with the teacher, and then we do Google Meet classes or Zoom classes where the person who is deaf is able to help with communication in the class. We're all using Google Meet or Google Classroom. And what we found really good with it is in the Google Meet, there's a subtitle section. So
wow.
the kids can turn it on, not on their phones, but if they're on laptops, and it comes up in subtitles. So that is, we find that really, really helpful. Our kids are different than other kids where people would have their kids and would be in their local school. Our kids are from all over the country. So they don't have friends as such within their local areas. So there's that extra isolation for our kids. So when Hannah approached me with this idea, it was a brilliant way that we could just get kids linking together. Parents jumped at it. They want kids to be involved in anything and to be the same as anyone else. But I want my classroom back.
I've no doubt. I've no doubt, and I speak on behalf of all of the musicians across the world, and more specifically Ireland, and of course the musicians in Dublin Concert Band. We want our band room back, because at the minute the conversation for us is actually, and this is difficult as a conductor. I'll let you in some insight. Typically, I think that everybody turns up on a Thursday and a Sunday to play high quality music and rehearse to the nth degree. But actually, what we're all missing is that physical interaction, sitting with each other and having a conversation and being able to engage with each other in the way that we were used to. So it'll never fill the gap, so to speak, online. So it's interesting to hear how you've adapted. It was amazing to hear that you had reached out and said that you were willing to do this, and it's something that is so important to me and for the likes of the Dublin Concert Band, that we see as much inclusive content being delivered as possible, that really everybody has a place to contribute. And personally, I was blown away by the professionalism, because in terms of production, you sometimes allow for difficulties in people's recordings, etc. But you guys knocked it out of the park, is what I'm going to say. Total pros. So it was great to see that. Are you working on any other online projects at the minute, or is it just trying to keep the day-to-day going as much as you can handle?
Day-to-day classroom teaching, and then the other thing that I've set up, kind of linking in as regards kids that would be disconnected and that weren't engaging in their classroom lessons. Obviously teenagers, they much prefer to be playing video games all night than getting up in the morning and doing their classes. So I started doing a class assembly. So it's a bit more difficult than others, and my aim was to have as many of the students involved as possible. So this is our 4th week now doing it. The first week, a message from our principal. Each week we put a piece of music into it. So the only way I figured out to do it is I'll have 6 kids on my screen. I sign the song. They copy me as we would in choir, as I'd be the conductor, and then my sister films it. Because with any filming on a screen, I wanted to give the impression that it was a choir, and as a choir you have a group of people there. I'm not up to all the technology that you've used for editing all the stuff. So filmed it that way, and then edited into the software then that we've been using. So 1 week it was birthdays. So all the kids' birthdays, and we got photos of all the kids. This week is my best memory. So kids are sending me in videos of their best memories of school this year. So the idea, and then last week we did a message from teachers. So I got a few teachers to send it something funny and lighthearted, because they're hearing all how tough it is and how hard it is. And I think us as teachers, when we're in school, you try and make things lighthearted and get them through the day. So we've kept it very lighthearted. So from that, then I approached a group of students and went, okay, I want you each to do something for the end of the year. So in fairness, they're after making a 12-minute video of kids from school. So
Wow.
of 80 kids, I think they've about 70 that the videos and photos from, and they edited it all together. So we'll be putting that up on our website next week. So that's the main things that we're doing.
You're doing a lot. You've got a lot going on there. Yeah, and can you do me a favor? Can you make sure that you share any of the links and anywhere that we can go to and see that with us? Because we'd like to, we'll put that up on the website and obviously featured here as well. I'm delighted to hear there's so much activity going on, because it can be difficult. And I think, you know, you guys are just amazing, because thinking about the challenges for any child and maybe the kind of the more negative aspect of this, sometimes getting into school can be the breakaway and you know, that kind of uplifting sense and re-engaging with their mates and their friends. So well done, amazing to hear all of that work going on. Can I ask, in terms of the video and the production, how did you feel about it all knitting together as a kind of presentation? Because obviously talking about this through texts and emails is one thing, but did it realize the vision that we discussed?
It blew my mind. I wasn't expecting that at all. I know when Hannah said it to me first, and she thought one person to sign it, and I'd be very much of the view of, you should get as many as you can involved, you know, open it up. It shouldn't be just one person. So I think Hannah got a bit of a shock when I went, yeah, it'd be grand, I'll get ones to do it, no problem. But when to see it all together, the response from the deaf community has been huge, absolutely huge. The response from our school community has been huge. The two little kids, there's one of two little kids with blondie hair. They wouldn't have heard any of the music whatsoever.
Wow.
So like they literally, so the way that I taught the music was I filmed myself, sent it to the parents, and then the parents got the kids to learn it from that. They took the video and sent it back. But they wouldn't have heard anything. There's another family that they wouldn't have heard. There's 3 kids, and only one of them would have heard the music. The others wouldn't have heard the music. So when you kind of know the kids in the background and their hearing losses and that,
yeah,
for them to do it, and their parents love it, and the kids love music. But to see the finished product was just out of this world.
Yeah, I have to be honest, I'll happily admit online to everybody, it was quite emotional, because in the midst of putting all this together, and you're quite right, it does take some time, it's hard to know actually what it looks like until you have the finished product. And as I said to somebody else in an interview, I can't think about that music anymore without the accompaniment of the visuals and it being signed. It's this symbiosis now between the two, and it's this beautiful piece of art. If I'm being really honest, and moreover, and I haven't said this to anybody in the DCB committee or the band, but I'm saying it now live, so we have to do it when we can. Soon coming out of lockdown, we're going to have to do a live performance and have everybody there and signing to it as best we can, because as I say, I don't see how we can play that piece of music without having all of the contributors to it in some way, shape or form. It was just beautiful to see. and to have obviously the brilliant band of DCB playing, but to see yourselves signing and singing through sign language was absolutely beautiful. And I want to thank you in particular, because I knew you had a lot of work to do. Little did I realize you did an awful lot more to make that happen. And in a very short space of time. Yeah, I think you had that back to us within 24 or 36 hours. So well done to
About
you.
that.
It was amazing. Absolutely
And when you
amazing.
don't, the first two people that are on it, the couple, Dr. John Bosco, he's actually one of the head people in the deaf community. So for him to do something like that is huge.
Wow.
His wife Audrey is an SNA in my school, so she's my support in the primary school for a choir. But he's one of the highest people in the deaf community. So for him to do it, it's huge recognition for what you're doing.
That is amazing. Well, that's down to the value of all the hard work and the contribution that you all put in. And I'm delighted that we in DCB were able to facilitate that in some way. I suppose the cherry on the cake was to see it getting landed on RT News, and I think Minister Simon Harris retweeted it and
Yeah,
different things. So amazing
yeah,
traction it got, and as well as that, it's great to see so many other groups that are contributing online in the same way. It's nice to see that community groups like yourselves and ourselves are getting recognised.
yeah.
Ironically, at one of the most difficult times for all of us. So what I'm going to do, well, actually, before I leave you, I suppose what I'd like to ask you, other than your classroom, what are you looking forward to, be it in your professional space or in a more social, private space? What are you looking forward to when you get out of lockdown proper, when it's completely gone and diminished? What are you really looking forward to?
Meeting up with my friends. I had a knee replacement in December, so I was off work, say, for 3 months, and I'd literally just gone back to work, and then this all happened. So I've been isolating, and it just feels like an eternity.
Yeah.
So to get out and to go for a walk, meet my mates, go for coffee, go for a nice meal, just get back to normality would be brilliant. What are you
Absolutely.
looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? I think I'm really looking forward to a walk in a park with my kids and my wife, having bought a nice coffee in a nice Starbucks or something, where we can actually go in and indulge ourselves and see people
Yeah.
around. Because I really miss the interaction with people. I really enjoy the energy of engaging with people. So, and I'm suffering a little bit from Zoom lag, which is ironic that I agreed to do this. But yeah, I am. I'm suffering a little bit from Zoom lag at the minute. So it'll be just nice to be in each other's company. I have said this to the band, and I think musicians and artists and teachers and everybody across the world would probably agree with this statement. It's going to be extremely emotional for me to walk back into the band room and pick up the baton and put it down for that first note. I can feel myself getting emotional now thinking about it. It's just something that we're all longing for. But we're going to keep the chin up and keep doing the good stuff like you guys are and like you're doing. So before you go, I want to share some of the comments that are coming in, because I know you mentioned earlier that you're not on Facebook. I don't know how you've survived life avoiding Facebook, so well done. But some of the comments coming through are fabulous work that you do, Shirley. You're an amazing lady. A great idea. I'm assuming that's for the collaboration, the live collaboration that we have to make happen. And Maura has said, looking forward to that concert. Yep. So well done, Shirley, and thank you for joining us on DCBtv, our first episode. What I'm going to do for everybody now is actually play the clip of the performance. So Shirley, you can sign off, but thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again live in person, hopefully not too long in the future.
Definitely.
So here
Definitely.
is DCB and the Holy Family and Heroes to Us, David Bowie's Heroes.
NASA. Heroes. The day.
So there we have it. That was Heroes by David Bowie, or Heroes to Us collaboration with the Holy Family School for the Deaf Choir. Dublin Concert Band in collaboration. A huge thank you to Shirley Higgins and all the team there, and a special note of thanks to the beautiful Ella right at the very end of the clip there for seeing out that overall production. As we leave you now, this is the end of the first episode. First of all, a huge thank you to everybody that's joined us. Once again, Shirley, who's joined us, Toby and Warren. And a huge thank you to all of our backstage production staff that are remotely working in the background, which includes Kieran Sharkey up in Donegal, Muireann Sheehan, Derek Mander and Hannah Levy as well for all of their work. My apologies for the glitches. Despite all the testing, it clearly is a live show, so apologies for that, and we'll do a little bit more testing and make sure it's much more seamless for next week. When we visit you next week, we're going to have more guests from the band, more friends of DCB, and next week we're going to be engaging in some conductors and arrangers corner, because the featured virtual performance will be a piece of music called Gather the Gales, also known as O Roche de Vahawalya, an arrangement of my own that was first found in the first iteration for the RTE Concert Orchestra and has now been made an arrangement for wind band and brass band. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that piece of music itself. For now, thank you very much for joining us online. If you've got any questions, feel free to contact us by putting some information or questions in the thread below on our Facebook page, or you can contact us at dcbsecretary@gmail.com. For now, stay safe, stay well, and we look forward to seeing you again next week on DCB TV.